There is a thief in the night of your soul. You may not see it, may not even sense its presence, but it is there, moving through the unlit corridors of your psyche, siphoning away your vitality, drop by precious drop. It is the architect of that inexplicable exhaustion that clings to you even after a full night's sleep, the silent author of that nagging sense of unfulfillment that whispers amidst your greatest achievements. It is the unseen weight that bows your spirit, the invisible chain that binds your truest, most potent self. This thief is not an external force, no malevolent entity from myth or legend come to claim your due. It is far more intimate, far more deeply woven into the fabric of your being. It is the part of you that you refuse to meet, the face in the mirror you turn away from, the echo in the heart you try to silence. It is your shadow, and the energy you expend in keeping it hidden, in denying its existence, in fleeing its embrace, is the very life force it steals. You were not born with this division. As a child, you were a seamless whole, a universe of potential. But then came the world, with its expectations, its judgments, its subtle and not so subtle pressures to conform. Be good, it whispered, or sometimes shouted. Be acceptable. Be like us. And so, the great sorting began. Parts of you that were deemed too loud, too quiet, too intense, too sensitive, too angry, too joyful in the wrong moments, too curious about the forbidden, these were gradually, systematically, pushed into the cellar of the unconscious. They were not vanquished. They were merely disowned. This collection of exiled aspects, the sum total of all that you have repressed and denied within yourself, both negative and, paradoxically, positive potentials that didn't fit the script, this is the shadow. Carl Jung, that fearless cartographer of the soul's hidden territories, understood that the shadow is not merely a repository of weakness or vice. It is also the seat of immense, untapped power, of raw, untamed creativity, of authentic, instinctual life. It holds the gold we have been too afraid to claim. But to the ego, the conscious self that navigates our daily lives, the shadow often appears monstrous, a dragon guarding a forbidden cave. And so, the ego builds walls, erects defenses, spends an incalculable amount of psychic energy to keep this perceived monster at bay. Think of the energy you expend maintaining a certain image, the constant vigilance required to ensure no unapproved part of you slips out. Think of the projections, those intense, irrational reactions you have to others, seeing in them the very traits you deny in yourself. That coworker whose ambition infuriates you. Perhaps it mirrors your own stifled drive. That acquaintance whose vulnerability makes you recoil. Perhaps it reflects your terror of your own tenderness. Each projection is a misplaced fragment of your own soul, an arrow shot outward that carries a piece of your life force with it. Consider the self-sabotage, those moments when you are on the cusp of a breakthrough, a new level of love or success, and inexplicably you falter, you retreat. This is often the shadow, fearing that true success will expose it, or fearing that it is unworthy of the light. It pulls you back into the familiar darkness, draining your momentum, stealing the joy of your potential becoming. The shadow feeds on denial. The more you pretend it isn't there, the more powerful its subterranean influence becomes. It seeps into your moods, creating inexplicable anxieties, sudden melancholies, or bursts of rage that seem to come from nowhere. It drives compulsions, those repetitive behaviors or thought patterns that offer fleeting relief but ultimately leave you feeling more depleted, more estranged from your core. These are the psychic leaks, the fissures in the dam of your consciousness through which your vital energy escapes, drawn down into the shadowlands to animate the disowned parts of yourself. You might feel it as a chronic lack of motivation, a persistent apathy, a sense that you are living a half-life, a pale imitation of the vibrant being you sense you could be. This is not a moral failing. It is a psychological reality. The energy required to keep a significant portion of your psyche locked away in darkness is immense. It is a constant, silent war waged within, and the primary casualty is your own aliveness. The ancient alchemists knew this in their symbolic language. They spoke of the prima materia, the chaotic, dark, and unformed base material from which gold could be made. Your shadow is this prima materia. To refuse to engage with it is to leave that gold unrefined, that potential unrealized, and to allow the energy that could fuel your transformation to instead drain away into the sands of repression. The first step toward reclaiming this stolen life force is the courageous act of turning to face the thief, to acknowledge that the darkness you fear is not only a part of you but holds a vital key to your wholeness. It is an invitation to descend, not into oblivion, but into the rich, fertile darkness where lost parts of your soul await their return, and with them, the return of your squandered power. The world demands a face, a mask, and we, in our deep-seated need to belong, to be accepted, to survive, readily provide one. This is the persona, another of Jung's profound insights into the architecture of the human psyche. It is the carefully constructed self we present to the public, our psychological clothing tailored to fit the occasion, the competent professional, the dutiful child, the charming friend, the supportive partner. The persona is not inherently false, it is a necessary interface, a mediator between our inner world and the often harsh realities of the outer. Without it, we would be raw, exposed, constantly buffeted by social winds. But the danger, as with so many aspects of our psychic life, lies in over-identification. When the mask becomes mistaken for the true face, when the role becomes the entirety of our perceived being, then the persona ceases to be a functional tool and becomes a gilded cage, and a primary accomplice in the shadow's theft of our life force. Imagine an actor who plays a king so convincingly, for so long, that he forgets he is an actor. He begins to believe he is the king, even in the quiet of his own chambers. He carries the regal posture, the authoritative tone, the weight of the crown, even when no audience is present. The psychic energy required to maintain this regal facade, to suppress any impulse, any thought, any feeling that does not align with the image of king, is colossal. This is what happens when we become fused with our persona. We invest so much of our vital energy into polishing this external shell, into ensuring its perfection, that the authentic self, the self that exists behind the mask, begins to wither from neglect. The persona, in its attempt to present an idealized, acceptable version of ourselves, actively collaborates in pushing unwanted traits into the shadow. If your persona is that of the eternally patient saint, your justifiable anger gets relegated to the darkness. If your persona is the unshakable stoic, your tender vulnerabilities are banished. And every banished part takes with it a spark of your soul's fire. This over-identification with the persona creates a profound internal split. The conscious self, busy performing its role, becomes increasingly alienated from the deeper currents of the psyche. Life becomes a performance, and the applause of others becomes the primary measure of self-worth. But this applause is for the mask, not for the true self hidden beneath. And so, even amidst success and approval, a hollow echo can resonate, a sense of inauthenticity, a gnawing feeling that, if they knew the real me, they wouldn't approve. This fear, this constant low-level anxiety of being found out, is another way the shadow, aided by the rigid persona, drains our energy. The effort to maintain the illusion, to ensure the mask never slips, is a state of perpetual vigilance. Consider the corporate titan who projects an image of unyielding strength and ruthless efficiency, only to suffer from debilitating anxiety attacks in private, or to erupt in inexplicable rage at his family. His persona, the Iron Man, demands the suppression of his fear, his self-doubt, his need for rest, all of which fester in the shadow, erupting in symptoms that betray the lie of the mask and bleed his life force. Or think of the perfect mother persona, the woman who sacrifices her own needs, her own dreams, her own identity on the altar of her children's well-being, only to find herself consumed by resentment, or a deep, unnamed sorrow. Her shadow holds her unlived life, her strangled ambitions, and this unlived life cries out, subtly poisoning her joy and depleting her spirit. The persona, when it becomes too rigid, too dominant, acts like a dam, holding back the river of psychic energy that should flow freely between the conscious and unconscious realms. The pressure builds behind this dam, the pressure of the shadow, the pressure of the unlived life. And this pressure seeks an outlet. It may manifest as physical illness, as depression, as an overwhelming sense of meaninglessness. The life force, unable to express itself authentically through the narrow confines of the persona, turns inward, becoming stagnant, or erupts in destructive ways. Jung often spoke of the enantiodromia, the tendency for things to turn into their opposite when an extreme is reached. A persona that is too good can eventually constellate a powerful, destructive shadow. The energy that could be used for creative expression, for genuine connection, for spiritual growth, is instead co-opted to maintain the facade and suppress the burgeoning darkness. The irony is that the very approval the persona seeks often feels empty, because it is not the true self that is being seen or validated. This creates a hunger that can never be satiated by external means, a constant striving that further depletes our inner resources. To begin reclaiming the life force stolen by this dynamic, we must find the courage to look behind the mask, to acknowledge the discrepancy between who we pretend to be and who we truly are. It requires a willingness to loosen the grip of the persona, to allow for imperfection, for vulnerability, for the emergence of those aspects we have so carefully hidden, even from ourselves. It is an invitation to a more authentic, albeit often more challenging, way of being, where the energy once spent on performance can be redirected towards the integration of our whole self, shadow and all. Deeper still, within the hidden landscape of the psyche, moves another potent force, often shrouded in mystery and misunderstanding, and frequently relegated, in part, to the shadowlands, the anima in men, and the animus in women. Jung described these as the archetypal representations of the contrasexual aspects of our being, the inner feminine in a man, the inner masculine in a woman. These are not merely psychological constructs but living, dynamic energies that bridge our conscious ego to the vast depths of the collective unconscious. They are the soul images that carry the qualities of the other sex, qualities often conditioned out of us by cultural norms and gender stereotypes, and therefore, often unconsciously projected or suppressed, leading to a profound drain of life force. Consider a man raised in a culture that devalues emotional expression, sensitivity, and intuition, qualities traditionally associated with the feminine. His anima, carrying these very potentials, may be pushed into his shadow. He might consciously identify as strong, rational, and stoic, while an unacknowledged, underdeveloped feminine side languishes within. This disowned anima then seeks expression externally. He might find himself inexplicably drawn to women who embody these repressed qualities, sometimes to an obsessive degree, seeking in them the wholeness he lacks within himself. This is the classic falling in love with an anima projection. The beloved becomes a screen upon which he projects his own undeveloped soul image. The energy poured into this idealized projection, the desperate need for her to fulfill his inner lack, can be immense, a constant externalization of his own life force. When the projection inevitably shatters, as all projections must when confronted with the reality of another human being, the result can be bitter disappointment, resentment, or a desperate search for a new object for the projection, a cycle that continuously siphons his vitality. Conversely, his repressed anima might manifest negatively, leading to moodiness, sentimentality that feels alien to him, or a sharp, cutting irritability when his undeveloped feminine side feels threatened or misunderstood. Similarly, a woman whose upbringing or cultural environment has suppressed her assertive, intellectual, or directive qualities, traditionally associated with the masculine, may find her animus relegated to her shadow. She might present a persona of agreeableness and receptivity, while her inner potential for focused action, clear opinion, and independent thought remains untapped. Her unintegrated animus might then be projected onto men, leading her to seek out partners who embody an idealized masculinity, perhaps a powerful authority figure or a rebellious free spirit. She may feel an almost magical pull, believing this external figure holds the key to her own empowerment, only to find herself dominated, or perpetually disappointed when he fails to live up to the projected ideal. The energy spent in this external search, in trying to find her own inner masculine strength in another, is a profound loss of her own potential life force. Alternatively, a negative, unintegrated animus can manifest internally as a harsh, critical inner voice, full of rigid opinions and shoulds, constantly undermining her confidence and self-worth. This animus possession, as Jung called it, can fill her mind with contentious arguments, leaving her feeling drained, agitated, and disconnected from her deeper feminine wisdom. She might find herself engaging in power struggles, not from a place of integrated strength, but from a reactive, defensive posture dictated by her wounded animus. The life force stolen by the unintegrated anima or animus is not just about romantic projections. It's about the denial of whole parts of our being. When a man denies his anima, he cuts himself off from his capacity for relatedness, his intuition, his connection to the irrational wisdom of the unconscious, and the wellspring of his creativity. He may become overly rigid, dry, and disconnected from his emotional life, his soul slowly starving. When a woman denies her animus, she may struggle to assert her truth, to bring her ideas into the world with clarity and conviction, to stand her ground. She may feel diffuse, ungrounded, and unable to manifest her creative impulses effectively. The energy that should be fueling a vibrant inner dialogue, a sacred marriage, between her masculine and feminine principles, is instead lost in inner conflict or fruitless external pursuits. Reclaiming this life force involves consciously withdrawing these projections, turning inward to acknowledge and cultivate these contrasexual qualities within ourselves. For a man, it means daring to feel, to connect with his intuition, to value relationship and the inner world. For a woman, it means daring to think critically, to speak her truth with authority, to take focused action in the world. This integration is not about becoming androgynous in a superficial sense, but about becoming more fully human, more whole, allowing the rich tapestry of both masculine and feminine energies to weave together within, creating a profound inner vitality, and releasing the power that was once lost in the shadows of denial and projection. This journey towards integrating the anima or animus is a crucial step in stemming the tide of stolen life force, allowing us to access a deeper, more balanced wellspring of energy and creativity from within. Beyond the personal shadow and the complexities of the anima and animus, the unconscious speaks to us through an even older, more universal language, the language of archetypes. These are, as Jung illuminated, the primordial images, the psychic instincts, the inherited patterns of human experience that reside in the collective unconscious, shaping our perceptions, motivations, and behaviors from beneath the surface of awareness. The hero, the sage, the innocent, the orphan, the magician, the jester, the lover, the ruler, the caregiver, the creator, the rebel, the explorer, these are not mere literary tropes but living forces within the psyche. Each archetype possesses a spectrum of expression, a light side and a shadow side, and when we fail to consciously engage with these energies, or when we fall into the grip of their shadow aspects, they too become potent thieves of our life force. Consider the hero archetype, the call to adventure, to overcome obstacles, to strive for a noble goal. In its light, it fuels courage, resilience, and the drive to make a difference. But its shadow can manifest as arrogance, a need to conquer and dominate, a restless inability to find peace, or, if the hero's call is refused or repressed, it can flip into victimhood, a perpetual sense of powerlessness and resentment. The energy that could have propelled heroic action is then turned inward, corroding the soul, or outward in destructive complaint. The life force that should have been channeled into courageous striving is instead squandered in battling inner demons of inadequacy or projecting blame onto the world for one's unlived heroic potential. The sage, with its quest for truth, wisdom, and understanding, offers profound insight and detachment in its light. Yet, its shadow can lead to dogmatism, ivory tower isolation, a cold intellectualism devoid of heart, or the cynical dismissal of all that cannot be rationally proven. The seeker who becomes trapped in the sage's shadow may find themselves endlessly accumulating knowledge without embodying wisdom, their life force dissipated in abstract theories rather than lived experience, their potential for true understanding replaced by a sterile knowingness. The energy meant for illumination becomes a barrier to connection. Think of the innocent, with its capacity for trust, optimism, and simple joy. A beautiful energy, yet its shadow can be a crippling naivety, a denial of reality, a refusal to take responsibility, leading to repeated disillusionment and a state of perpetual dependency. The life force of the innocent, meant to keep the heart open and wondering, can be drained by constant shocks to its unrealistic worldview, leaving a residue of bitterness or a retreat into a fragile fantasy world. Or the trickster, that vital archetype of disruption, humor, and boundary crossing, essential for shaking up stagnant systems and perceptions. In its light, it brings innovation, laughter, and a healthy irreverence. But its shadow is the destructive prankster, the malicious saboteur, the agent of chaos for its own sake, leading to broken trust, self-destruction, and alienation. The energy of the trickster, when unmoored from a conscious ethical compass, can wreak havoc, consuming life force in a whirlwind of impulsive, often harmful actions. Each archetype we fail to integrate consciously, or whose shadow aspect we allow to dominate, creates an imbalance in the psyche. If we over-identify with one archetype's light side, its shadow grows in the darkness, eventually demanding attention, often through crisis or breakdown. If we repress an archetypal energy altogether because its expression was shamed or forbidden in our upbringing, perhaps the rebellious spirit, the creative artist, or the passionate lover, that energy doesn't vanish. It festers in the shadow, becoming distorted, demanding, and often emerging in ways that feel out of our control, siphoning our conscious will and energy. Imagine a soul with a powerful, unacknowledged creator archetype. This person might feel a constant, gnawing restlessness, a sense of being unfulfilled, perhaps even falling into depression, as the creative life force, denied its natural outlet, turns stagnant or destructive. Their vitality is literally being choked off by the repression of this fundamental archetypal energy. To reclaim the life force stolen by these unintegrated or shadowy archetypal patterns, we must become students of our own inner theater. We must learn to recognize which archetypal scripts are running our lives, both consciously and unconsciously. Are you playing the martyr when the situation calls for the warrior? Are you stuck in the orphan, endlessly seeking rescue, when the magician within you has the power to transform your reality? This isn't about choosing one archetype and discarding others. It's about cultivating a flexible, conscious relationship with the full spectrum of these primordial energies. It's about recognizing their shadow manifestations within ourselves without shame, and consciously choosing to engage their more constructive, life-enhancing potentials. This is the work of bringing the gods and goddesses down from their distant heavens or up from their shadowy underworlds and integrating them into the human heart, transforming their raw, often chaotic power into focused, creative, and life-giving energy. By doing so, we stop feeding the shadows of these ancient patterns and begin to draw upon their immense wellsprings of wisdom, strength, and vitality, turning what was once a drain into a source of profound empowerment. This is the path of archetypal alchemy, transmuting the lead of our unconscious compulsions into the gold of conscious, individuated living. The tendrils of the shadow, the complexities of anima and animus, the drama of the archetypes, these do not exist in a vacuum. They are rooted in a psychic soil far deeper and more ancient than our personal history. This is the realm Jung termed the collective unconscious, a vast, timeless reservoir of human experience, the psychic inheritance of all humanity. It is the bedrock of the soul, containing the imprints of millennia of joys, sorrows, fears, triumphs, myths, symbols, and instincts. And just as our personal unconscious holds our individual shadow, the collective unconscious carries its own immense shadows, the unhealed wounds of our ancestors, the dark undercurrents of our cultures, the sins of the fathers and mothers that are passed down through generations, often invisibly, yet profoundly impacting our lives and draining our vitality. Imagine a river, deep and wide, flowing beneath the surface of everyday awareness. This is the collective unconscious. Within its currents are not only the archetypes in their pure form but also their distorted, wounded expressions as they have been lived and passed down through human history. If your lineage carries a deep, unacknowledged trauma, perhaps the trauma of war, of famine, of persecution, of profound betrayal, that trauma does not simply disappear with the passing of those who directly experienced it. It can become an energetic imprint, a subtle, pervasive shadow that influences the emotional atmosphere of succeeding generations. You might be born into a family where an unspoken anxiety, a pervasive grief, or a deep-seated mistrust is palpable, even if its origins are never discussed. This is the collective shadow at work, subtly shaping your own emotional landscape, predisposing you to certain fears or patterns of behavior, and demanding a portion of your life force to carry its unseen burden. Consider the weight of cultural shadows. A society that has systematically oppressed a particular group, or engaged in widespread violence, or built its prosperity on injustice, carries a collective shadow. Individuals born into that society may unconsciously absorb aspects of this shadow, feeling a diffuse guilt, a nameless anger, or a compulsion to repeat or redress these historical wrongs in their own lives, often without fully understanding why. The energy tied up in these transpersonal burdens can be immense. It's as if we are carrying invisible backpacks filled with the unresolved sorrows and transgressions of those who came before us. This isn't about blame. It's about recognizing the profound interconnectedness of human experience, the way the past lives on in the psychic present. The collective unconscious is also the source of powerful symbols and myths that can, if misunderstood or unconsciously enacted, drain our energy. Think of the myth of Sisyphus, condemned to eternally push a boulder uphill, only to have it rolled down again. How many individuals live out this Sisyphean pattern in their careers, their relationships, their attempts at self-improvement, feeling trapped in a cycle of fruitless effort, their life force poured into a task that offers no ultimate fulfillment. This is often the enactment of an unconscious myth, a script drawn from the collective unconscious that dictates their fate until it is made conscious. Or the myth of Tantalus, forever reaching for fruit and water that recede from his grasp. This speaks to a deep-seated sense of lack, of being perpetually denied satisfaction, a pattern that can be fueled by collective anxieties about scarcity or unworthiness, draining vitality in a constant, unfulfilled striving. When we feel haunted by something larger than ourselves, a sorrow that seems too vast for our personal experience, a rage that feels ancient, or a recurring dream filled with symbols that resonate with a primal fear or longing, we are often touching the collective unconscious and its shadows. These are not merely personal neuroses. They are echoes from the deep past, calling for recognition, for integration. To ignore these echoes, to dismiss them as irrational, is to allow them to continue their subterranean drain on our life force. The energy spent resisting these deeper currents, trying to maintain a purely rational, individualistic view of ourselves in the face of these powerful transpersonal forces, is considerable. Reclaiming the life force enmeshed in the collective shadow requires a broadening of perspective, a willingness to see our personal struggles in the context of this larger human story. It involves acknowledging the ancestral burdens we may carry, not as a personal failing, but as part of our shared inheritance. Rituals of remembrance, acts of healing that extend beyond the individual to encompass familial or cultural wounds, can be profoundly liberating. It may involve exploring the myths and symbols that resonate most deeply within us, understanding how they are shaping our lives, and consciously choosing to engage with them in a new, more empowering way. This is not about being overwhelmed by the weight of history, but about drawing wisdom and strength from the deep well of human experience. By understanding that our personal shadow often has roots in these collective shadows, we can begin to differentiate what is ours to carry and heal, and what belongs to the larger field. In this process of differentiation and conscious engagement, we can release the energy that was bound up in unconsciously enacting these ancient dramas, freeing it for our own individual journey of becoming, our own unique contribution to the ongoing story of humanity. The collective unconscious, while a source of shadow, is also the ultimate wellspring of creativity, wisdom, and spiritual renewal. By daring to navigate its depths, we can transform its burdens into blessings, its drains into sources of profound, transpersonal power. The journey into these shadow depths, personal, relational, archetypal, collective, is not a descent into nihilism or despair. It is, in fact, the heroic path, the sacred pilgrimage that Jung called the process of individuation. This is the innate human urge towards wholeness, the lifelong journey of becoming the unique, authentic individual you were always meant to be. And at the very heart of this transformative quest lies the courageous, and often terrifying, imperative to confront, understand, and integrate the shadow and all its manifestations. For it is precisely by reclaiming the lost, disowned, and feared aspects of ourselves that we reclaim the life force that has been stolen, and begin to live with true vitality and purpose. Individuation is not about achieving some static state of perfection, some enlightened plateau where all darkness is vanquished. That is a fantasy of the ego. Rather, it is a dynamic, ongoing process of bringing more and more of the unconscious into conscious awareness, of forging a resilient and flexible ego that can navigate the complexities of both the inner and outer worlds. It is about holding the tension of opposites, light and dark, conscious and unconscious, good and evil, within oneself, without splitting or projecting. This courageous embrace of one's totality is where the alchemical transformation occurs, where the lead of our repressed nature is transmuted into the gold of authentic selfhood. The life force, previously squandered in maintaining inner divisions and fighting internal wars, is liberated and redirected towards growth, creativity, and genuine connection. The call to individuation often arises from a place of suffering. It might be the pain of a recurring destructive pattern, the emptiness of a life lived according to external expectations, the crisis of a shattered persona, or the raw ache of an unhealed wound. These are not signs of failure, but summons from the self, the archetypal core of wholeness that resides within each of us, urging us to embark on the journey home. To heed this call requires immense courage. It means turning away from the distractions of the outer world and daring to look within, to face the dragons we have so long avoided. It means acknowledging the thief within, the shadow that has been pilfering our vitality, and recognizing that this thief holds the keys to our own locked treasure. This journey is rarely linear or comfortable. There will be moments of disorientation, of feeling lost in the psychic wilderness. There will be encounters with aspects of ourselves that are difficult to accept, our pettiness, our envy, our rage, our fear. This is the necessary descent into the underworld, the Nikia, as Jung, drawing from Greek mythology, termed it. Like Orpheus descending to retrieve Eurydice, or Inanna stripping herself of her adornments at each gate to the underworld, we too must be willing to shed our illusions, our defenses, our cherished self-images, to reclaim the lost parts of our soul. Each confrontation with a shadow aspect, each piece of disowned self that is brought into the light of consciousness and accepted with compassion, releases a burst of previously trapped energy. The feeling of lightness, of newfound freedom, that can follow such an integration is palpable. It is the return of stolen life force. Consider the individual who has always projected their aggression onto others, seeing the world as a hostile place. Through the work of individuation, they might begin to recognize this aggression as their own disowned power, a vital life force that, when repressed, turns sour and paranoid. By consciously acknowledging and integrating this assertive energy, learning to wield it constructively rather than fear it or project it, they not only feel more empowered and less fearful, but also reclaim the enormous psychic energy previously spent on maintaining the projection and defending against a perceived hostile world. Or think of the person trapped in a debilitating perfectionism, their life force drained by the constant striving for an unattainable ideal. As they begin to integrate their shadow, the part of them that is messy, imperfect, and fallible, they may find a new sense of ease, creativity, and self-acceptance, liberating the energy that was once consumed by harsh self-criticism. The path of individuation is deeply personal, yet it draws upon universal patterns. It is the hero's journey, unique to each individual, yet following an archetypal map. It demands honesty, perseverance, and a willingness to embrace paradox. It is the alchemical process of solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate, breaking down old, rigid structures of the personality and reforming them into a more integrated, authentic whole. This is not a journey to be undertaken lightly, nor is it one that can be achieved through mere intellectual understanding. It requires engaging the unconscious on its own terms, through its own language, a language that often speaks most clearly in the twilight realm of dreams. The unconscious, particularly the shadow, does not always communicate in straightforward prose. It speaks in symbols, in metaphors, in the often bizarre and emotionally charged narratives of our dreams. Dreams are the royal road into the hidden kingdom of the psyche, the nightly theater where our disowned parts, our unfulfilled potentials, and our deepest fears and longings take center stage. Jung saw dreams not as mere random firings of neurons, but as purposeful, intelligent communications from the unconscious, offering invaluable guidance on the path of individuation and crucial clues to where our life force is being misdirected or stolen. To ignore our dreams, or to dismiss them as meaningless, is to turn a deaf ear to the wisdom of our own soul. When the shadow seeks our attention, it often appears in our dreams as frightening figures: the pursuer, the monster, the dark stranger. These are not necessarily literal enemies, but symbolic representations of aspects of ourselves that we have exiled and now fear. The instinct is to flee from these dream figures, to wake up in a sweat, relieved it was only a dream. But Jungian dream work invites a different approach: to turn and face these figures, to ask them what they want, what message they carry. Often, the terrifying pursuer, when confronted, reveals itself to be a bearer of lost strength, a forgotten talent, or a suppressed emotion that is vital for our wholeness. The energy we expend in fleeing these figures in our dreams, and by extension, in our waking lives, is a direct drain on our vitality. By courageously engaging with these dream symbols, we begin the process of reintegrating these lost parts and reclaiming the energy bound up in their repression. Consider recurring dreams. These are like urgent messages from the unconscious, knocking repeatedly at the door of awareness. Perhaps you dream, night after night, of being unprepared for an exam, or of losing your teeth, or of being trapped in a labyrinth. These are not to be taken literally, but symbolically. The unpreparedness might speak to a fear of judgment, or a feeling of inadequacy in some area of your waking life where your shadow holds unacknowledged incompetence, or, conversely, unexpressed competence. Losing teeth, a common dream symbol, can relate to a loss of power, a fear of aging, or difficulties with communication, all potential areas where shadow material might be constellated and draining energy. The labyrinth might symbolize a feeling of being lost or trapped in a complex situation, perhaps one created by your own unconscious patterns. Exploring the feelings and associations connected to these recurring dream images can unlock profound insights into the shadow dynamics at play and point the way towards resolution and the liberation of psychic energy. Nightmares, too, are potent communications. While deeply unsettling, they often signify that a particularly charged complex or a deeply repressed part of the shadow is breaking through into consciousness, demanding attention. The intense fear experienced in a nightmare is a measure of the psychic energy bound up in that repressed material. To work with a nightmare is to approach the terrifying images with a willingness to understand their symbolic meaning, to see them not as threats, but as desperate cries from a wounded or exiled part of the self. As we begin to decipher their message and integrate the underlying content, the intensity of the nightmares often subsides, and the energy they consumed is released back into the conscious system. Even seemingly mundane dreams can offer profound wisdom about our shadow and our path. The people, places, and objects in our dreams are rarely just themselves. They are symbols, imbued with personal and archetypal meaning. A dream about a childhood home might be speaking to unresolved issues from the past, or to a need to reconnect with a more innocent, authentic part of oneself that has been overshadowed. A dream about a particular animal might be pointing to instinctual energies that have been suppressed. The key is to approach dreams with curiosity, respect, and a willingness to look beyond the surface narrative. Keeping a dream journal, paying attention to the feelings evoked by the dream, and exploring the personal associations with its symbols are all vital practices. This dialogue with the unconscious through dreams is a direct way to identify where our life force is leaking into the shadowlands and to begin the sacred work of retrieval. It transforms the dream world from a place of confusion or fear into a rich source of guidance, healing, and the recovery of our own vital power. And then there are those moments, those strange and luminous concurrences, when the inner world and the outer world seem to whisper to each other, when an external event mirrors an internal state with an uncanny, numinous precision. Jung called this synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence of an inner, psychic event and an outer, physical event, where there is no discernible causal connection, yet the alignment feels profoundly significant. These are not mere chance occurrences. They are glimpses into the underlying interconnectedness of all things, moments when the veil between the conscious and unconscious, the psyche and the material world, becomes momentarily transparent. Synchronistic events often serve as powerful signposts on the journey of individuation, frequently highlighting areas where our shadow is active or guiding us towards the integration of disowned parts, thereby helping us reclaim stolen life force. Imagine you have been struggling with a deep-seated fear of failure, a shadow aspect that has paralyzed your creative endeavors for years. You finally muster the courage to begin working on a long-deferred project, and that very day, you randomly encounter an old mentor you haven't seen in years, who offers exactly the encouragement or insight you needed. Or perhaps you are grappling with a difficult decision, feeling torn between your habitual, safe persona and a riskier, more authentic path. You then open a book at random, or overhear a snippet of conversation, or see a particular image that speaks directly to your dilemma with an almost shocking clarity. These are synchronicities. They feel like winks from the universe, affirming that you are on the right track, or nudging you towards a deeper truth. The energy and conviction that can arise from such an experience can be immense, cutting through doubt and inertia, and infusing your efforts with renewed vitality. Synchronicity often emerges when we are actively engaging with our unconscious material, perhaps through dream work, therapy, or deep introspection. It's as if the unconscious, once acknowledged and invited into dialogue, begins to orchestrate these outer reflections to further the process of integration. A forgotten memory surfaces, bringing with it a wave of grief or anger, shadow emotions long suppressed. Shortly thereafter, you might encounter a song on the radio, a scene in a film, or a story shared by a friend that precisely mirrors the emotional tone or thematic content of that recovered memory, validating its importance and offering a new perspective. This can provide the crucial support needed to stay with the difficult emotion, to process it, rather than retreating back into repression, thereby liberating the energy that was bound up in keeping it down. These meaningful coincidences can also serve as warnings, highlighting how our unacknowledged shadow might be creating negative patterns in our lives. If you consistently find yourself attracting partners who betray you, and simultaneously, you keep, accidentally, stumbling upon articles or stories about betrayal, this might be a synchronistic nudge to look at your own shadow issues around trust, self-worth, or perhaps even a disowned capacity for betrayal within yourself. The repetition of the outer event mirrors an inner, unconscious dynamic. The life force lost in these repetitive, painful patterns can only be reclaimed when the underlying shadow projection is made conscious and integrated. Synchronicity, in this sense, acts like a compassionate but insistent teacher, pointing again and again to the lesson that needs to be learned. The key to recognizing and benefiting from synchronicity is attentiveness and a willingness to see meaning beyond mere causality. It requires a shift from a purely rational, mechanistic worldview to one that acknowledges the subtle, symbolic interplay between psyche and world. When we cultivate this awareness, we begin to notice these alignments more frequently. They are not magical thinking, in the superstitious sense, but rather an empirical observation of how the psyche interacts with reality when we are attuned to its deeper layers. Each synchronistic event, when recognized and reflected upon, can provide a jolt of energy, a sense of being guided, a confirmation that our inner work is resonating with a larger, meaningful order. This, in itself, is a way of reclaiming life force, not by effort, but by attunement. It's the universe collaborating in our journey towards wholeness, helping us to see the hidden connections, to understand the symbolic language of our lives, and to gather the lost fragments of our soul, including those parts of our life force that were scattered and lost in the shadows of unconsciousness. To live with an awareness of synchronicity is to walk through the world with a sense of wonder and a deep trust in the guiding intelligence of the self, an intelligence that constantly seeks to lead us out of the shadows and into the fullness of our being. This journey of confronting the shadow, decoding dreams, and heeding synchronicities is not an intellectual exercise. It is the very crucible in which authentic meaning is forged. So much of the malaise of modern life, that pervasive sense of emptiness and existential dread, stems from a profound disconnection from the deeper layers of the psyche, from a life lived predominantly on the surface, in thrall to the persona and in flight from the shadow. When vast regions of our inner territory remain unexplored and unintegrated, the life force that naturally resides there cannot circulate freely, cannot inform our choices, cannot infuse our actions with passion and purpose. Instead, It stagnates, or worse, it fuels the very anxieties and compulsions that keep us trapped in cycles of meaninglessness. The stolen life force manifests not just as fatigue, but as a starvation of the soul. Finding meaning, in a Jungian sense, is not about discovering some preordained, external purpose. It is about the courageous, ongoing work of self-reclamation. It is about excavating the gold that lies hidden in the darkness of the shadow. For within that disowned self are not only our wounds and our fears, but also our suppressed strengths, our forgotten talents, our raw creativity, and our deepest, most authentic values. When we dare to bring these shadow aspects into the light of consciousness, to accept them and integrate them, we unlock a wellspring of energy and meaning that was previously inaccessible. The artist who has suppressed their creative impulse for fear of criticism or failure, upon finally embracing that shadowed part of themselves, may find their life suddenly imbued with a passion and purpose that had been missing for decades. The life force that was once consumed by repression is now channeled into joyful creation. The individual who has always denied their anger, seeing it as bad or unspiritual, might discover through shadow work that this anger, when consciously owned and understood, is a powerful source of energy for setting boundaries, for fighting injustice, for protecting what is sacred. It transforms from a destructive, shadowy force into a potent, life-affirming tool. The meaning derived from this integration is not abstract, it is visceral, embodied. It is the feeling of coming home to oneself, of living in alignment with one's deepest truths. This process of integrating the shadow is what infuses life with authentic meaning because it makes us more whole, more real. The energy that was once spent on internal conflict, on maintaining the split between the conscious ideal and the unconscious reality, is now available for living a more engaged, passionate, and purposeful life. Moreover, the confrontation with the shadow often leads to a profound reevaluation of what we consider meaningful. The superficial goals dictated by the persona or by societal pressures, wealth, status, approval, may lose their allure as we connect with the deeper needs of the soul. Meaning begins to emerge from authenticity, from genuine connection with others, born from our own inner integration, rather than neediness or projection, from contributing our unique gifts to the world, however humble they may seem. It arises from the courage to live our own personal myth, rather than an inherited or imposed script. Jung emphasized that the greatest burden a child can bear is the unlived life of the parents. By integrating our own shadow, by daring to live our own lives fully, we not only reclaim our own stolen life force and find our own meaning, but we also, in a sense, heal something for the generations that came before and for those who will follow. This is not to say the path is easy. Confronting the shadow can be painful, disorienting. It requires us to face our own complicity, our own darkness. But it is through this very confrontation that the light of meaning begins to dawn. As Jung so wisely put it, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The meaning we seek is not found by looking away from the difficult parts of ourselves, but by looking directly into them, by embracing them, by integrating them. It is in the sacred alchemy of this inner work that the lead of our suffering is transformed into the gold of profound, lived meaning, and the stolen life force is not just reclaimed, but transmuted into the radiant energy of a soul that is finally, courageously, becoming whole. This is the treasure that awaits those who dare to face the thief within. The ultimate act of reclaiming this stolen life force, the culmination of the alchemical journey through shadow, persona, animus/animus, archetypes, dreams, and synchronicity, lies in the integration of opposites. This is the conjunction, the sacred marriage of Jungian psychology, where the warring factions within the psyche are brought into conscious, dynamic relationship. It is the understanding that light cannot exist without darkness, consciousness without the unconscious, strength without vulnerability, the rational without the irrational. To live a life of wholeness, of vibrant, unhindered vitality, is to learn to hold this tension, to embrace the paradox of our multifaceted nature, rather than perpetually striving to eradicate one pole in favor of the other. For so long, we are taught to choose, be good, not bad, be strong, not weak, be logical, not emotional. This binary thinking is the breeding ground of the shadow. Every quality we exile in our pursuit of a one-sided ideal takes with it a portion of our life force, creating an imbalance that inevitably seeks correction, often through painful symptoms or crises. The energy spent maintaining these artificial divisions, and policing the borders of our acceptable self, is monumental. Integration, however, proposes a radical alternative: to recognize that these apparent opposites are not enemies, but complementary partners in the dance of life. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, for that would be to eliminate a vital part of our own energy and potential, but to bring it into relationship with the light, to harness its power consciously and ethically. Imagine the alchemist in their laboratory, not trying to destroy the base metals, but to understand their properties, to work with them, to combine them in just the right way, under just the right conditions, to facilitate their transformation into gold. This is the inner work of integrating opposites. It requires us to withdraw our projections, to take back those qualities we have cast out onto others, both the idealized, golden, shadows and the denigrated, dark, ones. It means acknowledging, for instance, that the capacity for anger, which we might have projected onto an aggressive boss, is also a source of our own disowned assertive power. Or that the vulnerability we admired in a gentle friend is a reflection of our own tender heart, long hidden behind a stoic persona. As these projections are re-internalized, the energy that was bound up in them flows back into our own psychic system, enriching and enlivening us. This integration is a process of making peace with our own complexity. It is the warrior learning the wisdom of the healer, the intellectual embracing the wisdom of the heart, the pragmatist making space for the dreamer. It is about finding the third way, the transcendent function that Jung described, which emerges from the tension of opposites, leading to a new level of consciousness and a more complete experience of self. This is not a bland homogenization, but a vibrant interplay. The life force, once fragmented and conflicted, begins to flow with a new coherence and power. Think of a great river that has been dammed in multiple places, its flow restricted, its energy dissipated. The work of integration is like systematically removing those dams, allowing the river to flow freely, powerfully, towards its destination, carving its own unique path through the landscape. This alchemical marriage within also transforms our relationship with the outer world. When we are no longer at war with ourselves, we cease to project our inner conflicts onto others. We can meet people with greater compassion and clarity, seeing them for who they are, rather than as screens for our disowned parts. Our actions become more authentic, more aligned with our deepest values, because they are sourced from a place of inner coherence, rather than from unconscious compulsions or the need to maintain a facade. The energy that was once lost in defensiveness, in people-pleasing, in the exhausting effort to be someone we are not, is now available for creative expression, for meaningful work, for genuine love, for the simple, profound joy of being alive. This integration is not a one-time achievement, but a lifelong practice, a continuous dance between the known and the unknown, the light and the dark. There will always be new layers of the unconscious to explore, new aspects of the shadow to embrace. But with each conscious act of integration, we become more whole, more resilient, more capable of navigating the complexities of life with wisdom and grace. The life force that was once stolen by the unacknowledged shadow, by the rigid persona, by the projected anima or animus, by the unconscious pull of archetypes and collective wounds, is progressively reclaimed and transmuted. It becomes the fuel for our ongoing individuation, the radiant energy of a soul that is no longer hiding, no longer fighting itself, but is courageously, joyfully, and powerfully living its truth. This is the ultimate promise of facing the shadow, not the elimination of darkness, but the liberation of a light so profound, so authentic, that it illuminates our path and allows us to finally, fully, live. The journey to reclaim your life force, to confront the shadow you refuse to face, is the most vital, the most courageous, the most profoundly rewarding pilgrimage you will ever undertake. It is the path away from the half-life of conformity and repression, and towards the incandescent glow of your authentic, individuated self. This is not a quest for a life devoid of struggle, but for a life resonant with meaning, a life where your energy flows from the deep wellspring of your integrated being, rather than leaking away into the unseen crevices of denial. Remember, the shadow is not your enemy. It is the keeper of your lost treasures, the guardian of your untapped power, the fertile darkness from which your brightest light can emerge. To turn towards it is an act of ultimate self-love, an affirmation that you are worthy of your own wholeness. Each insight gained, each projection withdrawn, each disowned part embraced, is a victory that infuses you with a vitality you may have forgotten was possible. The fatigue that once clung to you like a shroud begins to lift, replaced by a quiet strength, a resilient joy. The gnawing emptiness gives way to a sense of profound purpose, born not from external accolades, but from the inner alignment of living your truth. This is your sacred responsibility, and your greatest adventure, to become the conscious author of your own story, to step out of the shadows of inherited patterns and unconscious compulsions, and to claim the full spectrum of your humanity. The power to do so is not outside of you, waiting to be found. It is within you, waiting to be unleashed. It is in the courage to look, the willingness to feel, the commitment to integrate. The thief in the night of your soul can be transformed into your most potent ally, if only you dare to meet its gaze, to understand its language, to welcome it home. Your life force is not gone forever, it is merely waiting. Waiting for you to turn, to face, to reclaim. And in that reclamation, you will find not just energy, but the immeasurable richness of a life lived authentically, courageously, and completely. The power is yours. The time is now. Your true life awaits.